You're not welcome here? My son's fiancée sneered, her voice like ice as she motioned for the security guards to escort me from the wedding. This celebration is only for important people, she added, her dismissive gaze sweeping over my modest dress. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. But her entire world was about to shake, because when her own mother saw me and exclaimed, "Margaret Bradley, is it really you?" The bride-to-be had no idea who I truly was. My old pickup truck looked like a rust bucket, a stark contrast parked between a gleaming Mercedes and a polished BMW in their magnificent circular driveway. Before me, the Harrington mansion rose like something out of a classic film. I took in the scene, the grand marble steps, the brass fixtures that gleamed under the warm afternoon sun, and the perfectly manicured hedges, each one trimmed to geometric perfection. I glanced at my watch. It was exactly 2 p.m., just as my son, Michael, had requested. The heavy front door swung open before my hand could even reach for the doorbell. A tall woman, in expensive-looking casual clothes, appeared, her eyes looking me up and down, with an expression of undisguised distaste. Her gaze traveled from my worn but sturdy work boots all the way up to my best dress, the simple navy blue one I had bought for Michael's college graduation 15 years ago. "You must have the wrong address, madam," she said coolly. "This isn't a homeless shelter. I believe you're looking for the next street over." Her words struck me like a physical slap. I stood there, frozen on their immaculate doorstep, my mouth opening and closing but no sounds coming out. A hot flush of embarrassment flooded my face as I struggled to process the sheer cruelty of what she had just said to me. "Mom, you finally made it." Michael's voice, bright and warm, rang out from just inside the doorway. He appeared behind the woman, dressed in a flowing outfit that probably cost more than my entire monthly pension. His face lit up with genuine, unadulterated joy as he pushed past the woman Chloe, his fiancée, and wrapped his arms around me in a tight embrace. Come in. I've been watching for you from the window." He grabbed my arm gently and pulled me forward, completely oblivious to the demeaning exchange that had just occurred. "Chloe, this is my mother, Margaret Bradley. Mom, meet Chloe Harrington, my wonderful fiancée." Chloe's expression shifted in an instant, like an actor changing masks on stage. The sneer dissolved into a strained, artificial smile that never reached her cold eyes. She extended a hand with the kind of palpable reluctance you might show to a stray animal you were forced to acknowledge. "Mrs. Bradley? Of course," she murmured, her handshake brief and dismissive. "Michael has mentioned you. Please, come inside." Michael beamed between us, squeezing my arm a little tighter. "Isn't this perfect? My two favorite women finally meeting." I managed a weak nod, swallowing the bitter taste that had formed in my mouth. The foyer stretched out before us like a modern cathedral. A massive crystal chandelier cast shimmering rainbows across the polished marble floors, and the walls were lined with oil paintings in ornate gold frames. My own reflection stared back at me from a dozen polished surfaces, looking small, out of place, and utterly insignificant in this grand space. "Your home is very impressive," I said, forcing the words through a tight throat. Chloe visibly straightened her shoulders, her confidence surging back. "Thank you. It's been in the family for 3 generations. We believe in maintaining certain standards." The deliberate emphasis she placed on the word standards wasn't lost on me. Michael, however, still glowing with excitement, missed it completely. "Wait until you see the dining room, Mom. We're having your favorite pot roast with mashed potatoes." He laughed. "Well, our chef's version of it, anyway. I told her you appreciate good, honest food." Chloe's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Yes," she said smoothly. "We've adapted the menu for today. Come on, both of you," Michael urged, pulling us toward a large arched doorway. "I can't wait to show Mom around before dinner." As we walked deeper into their palatial home, I could feel Chloe's eyes on me, catching her watching my reflection in every mirror and polished surface we passed. Her gaze felt like ice water trickling down my spine, calculating, cold, and deeply judgmental. Michael chattered on happily about wedding plans and family histories, his voice echoing off the impossibly high ceilings. "The main dining room seats 24, but we'll be cozy at the small table today," he explained, leading us into a room that could have easily housed my entire apartment. "Chloe's parents are traveling, so it's just the three of us." The small table was a magnificent mahogany piece, surrounded by chairs that looked as if they belonged in a museum exhibit. The place setting sparkled under yet another chandelier. I saw a bewildering array of forks, multiple crystal glasses, and cloth napkins folded into perfect, crisp triangles. I couldn't help but think about how I had eaten my breakfast that very morning off a paper plate while standing in my kitchen. Michael pulled out a chair for me. "Sit here, Mom. You'll have the best view of Chloe's grandmother's china collection." Chloe took her place at the head of the table, her posture radiating a sense of ownership and authority. Every movement she made was precise and calculated, seemingly designed to remind me whose territory I was on. The plush chair beneath me felt like a throne I had absolutely no right to occupy. "So, Mrs. Bradley," Chloe began, her voice as smooth as expensive whiskey, "Michael tells me you're recently retired. That must be quite an adjustment." "It has its moments," I replied, keeping my answer short, sensing a trap in her seemingly innocent question. Michael settled into his chair with a satisfied sigh. "Mom worked at the same factory for 37 years. Can you imagine that kind of dedication, Chloe?" "Indeed I can." Chloe's smile grew sharper, more predatory. "Loyalty is so important, isn't it? Knowing one's place, understanding where one belongs." Just then, a server appeared with the first course, some kind of delicate soup in a bowl so fine I was almost afraid to touch it. Michael dove into an enthusiastic conversation about floral centerpieces and seating charts, while Chloe and I circled each other verbally like wary animals. "And for the reception," Michael continued, "I thought we could do something fun and relaxed. Mom always says the best parties are the ones where people feel comfortable enough to be themselves." "How charming," Chloe murmured, her expression anything but. Though I imagine our guest list might have slightly different ideas about what comfort entails. While Chloe excused herself to check on dinner preparations, Michael gave me a tour of the main floor. The house felt less like a home and more like a museum. Everything was pristine, untouched, and emotionally cold. He showed me the library, filled with leather-bound books that looked as if they had never been opened, and the formal sitting room, with furniture too perfect to actually sit on. Chloe's grandfather started the investment firm, Michael explained, running his fingers along a massive marble mantelpiece. "The family's built quite a legacy here in Boston." I just nodded, thinking of my own legacy. A one-bedroom apartment in a quiet suburb and a pickup truck that was in desperate need of new brake pads. When we returned to the dining room, Chloe was already seated, scrolling through her phone. The table had been transformed, with multiple courses laid out like a military formation. I counted 4 different forks beside my plate, and felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach, wondering which one I was supposed to use first. "I hope you're hungry, Mrs. Bradley," Chloe said, setting her phone aside with deliberate precision. "Our chef prepared something accessible." Michael clapped his hands together. "Oh, this looks amazing, Mom. You're going to love this." The pot roast bore little resemblance to the hearty dish I'd made for him countless times. It was artfully arranged with tiny vegetables carved into precise geometric shapes, all drizzled with a sauce that probably had a fancy French name. Michael served himself enthusiastically, while Chloe watched me navigate the daunting silverware with barely concealed amusement. "So, tell me about the wedding budget," Chloe said suddenly, cutting her meat with surgical precision. "I assume you'll want to contribute something toward Michael's special day?" The fork trembled slightly in my hand. "Michael and I have already discussed what I can manage." Of course, Chloe's voice dripped with false sympathy. "I imagine retirement can be financially challenging. A fixed income, and all that." "Chloe," Michael looked up from his plate, a hint of warning in his tone. "Mom's been incredibly generous. She's giving us her savings for the honeymoon." "How touching." Chloe raised her wineglass in a mock toast. "Every little bit helps, doesn't it?" A wave of heat crawled up my neck. I focused intently on cutting my food, trying my best to ignore the condescension that dripped from her every word. I was thinking about the reception venue, Michael continued, oblivious to the crackling tension between us. Something elegant but warm. Mom always says the best celebrations are the ones that bring people together. Absolutely, Chloe agreed smoothly. Though we'll need to be thoughtful about the guest list. Some of my colleagues are quite particular about the company they keep. I set down my fork. What exactly are you trying to say? Nothing at all. Chloe's smile broadened, becoming even more unpleasant. Simply that different social circles have different expectations. I'm sure you understand. Your factory friends might not feel comfortable around investment bankers and politicians. Chloe! Michael laughed nervously. Mom's friends are wonderful people. I'm certain they are, darling. In their own way. Chloe's eyes never left mine. I just want everyone to feel appropriate. The word hung in the air like a direct challenge. I gripped my knife tighter, imagining for a fleeting second how satisfying it would be to wipe that smug, arrogant expression right off her face. Mom has great stories about her army days, Michael said quickly, finally sensing the growing tension. Tell Chloe about your time in Vietnam, Mom. I'm sure Mrs. Bradley's military experience was quite different from what we see today, Chloe interrupted smoothly. A different era, different standards of service. That did it. I straightened in my chair, the 37 years of manual labor evident in my broad shoulders. Different how? Chloe's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Oh, I simply meant that modern military service requires a certain level of sophistication. Chloe studies military history as a hobby, Michael added, trying to be helpful. She knows all about strategy and tactics. How fascinating, I said, my voice carefully level. And where did you serve? Well, I didn't actually serve, Chloe admitted, her confidence wavering for just a moment. But I've read extensively on the subject. Academic study often provides a much broader perspective than individual experience. The silence that followed stretched uncomfortably. Michael looked between the two of us with growing concern, finally recognizing that something was deeply wrong. Maybe we should talk about something else, he suggested brightly. The weather's been lovely, hasn't it? Indeed, Chloe recovered quickly. Perfect weather for outdoor weddings. Though I suppose that depends on one's definition of perfect. She was like a snake, slithering around every topic, always finding a new way to bite, to inject her venom, to make me feel small and insignificant. Michael kept trying to steer the conversation towards safer ground, but Chloe relentlessly circled back to her subtle jabs about money, class, and social standing. By the time dessert arrived, some elaborate creation that required its own special spoon, I felt like I was ready to explode. Michael chattered about flowers and music, while Chloe made veiled comments about appropriate wedding attire and suitable venues for people of modest means. Well, Michael finally said, glancing at his watch, I should start getting ready for dinner with the guys tonight. Mom, thank you so much for coming. Wasn't this wonderful? I managed to smile for his sake. Wonderful. Chloe stood up first, extending her hand with the same reluctance she'd shown earlier. It's been illuminating, Mrs. Bradley. I'm sure we'll see more of each other as the wedding approaches. Michael walked me to the door, chattering excitedly about next weekend's cake tasting and flower arrangements. He hugged me tight, his happiness radiating like sunshine. I'm so glad you two finally met, he whispered. I knew you'd get along. I kissed his forehead, the taste of lies and his good intentions mingling in my mouth. Drive carefully tonight, sweetheart. The heavy front door closed behind me with a soft thud that sounded like a vault ceiling shut. I walked to my truck slowly, feeling Chloe's eyes burning into my back from whatever window she was watching from. The engine turned over with a reluctant groan, protesting the afternoon's heat. 20 minutes into the drive home, stuck in Saturday traffic on the expressway, my phone rang. The display showed Michael's name, but the voice that answered wasn't his. Mrs. Bradley? This is Chloe. Michael stepped out for a moment, and I thought this would be a good opportunity for us to have a woman-to-woman conversation. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white as I merged into the slow lane. What do you want, Chloe? I want to help you, actually. Her voice carried that same oily smoothness from dinner. "I've been thinking about our conversation today, and I realize we might have gotten off on the wrong foot." "Is that what you call it?" "Look, I understand this situation is difficult for you. Michael is marrying into a different world than the one you're used to. There's no shame in that. We all have our place in society." A taxi cut in front of me, its horn blaring. I let it go, focusing on her words, trying to decipher her angle. "At the wedding, there will be some very important people in attendance. Investors, politicians, members of Boston's social elite. These are individuals who matter in our circles. Get to the point." "The point, Mrs. Bradley, is that appearances matter. I can't have Michael's mother looking like she wandered in from a soup kitchen." The words hit me like a physical blow. I swerved slightly, earning an angry honk from the car beside me. "Excuse me? I'm offering to help," she continued, unfazed. "Your dress today was quaint, but hardly appropriate for a Beacon Hill wedding. I'm prepared to give you $1,000 to purchase something more suitable. Consider it an investment in Michael's happiness." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The traffic light ahead turned red, and I rolled to a stop, my hands shaking with a rage so intense it felt like a physical force. "Are you listening, Mrs. Bradley? $1,000 should be more than enough for a decent dress. Shoes, the whole ensemble. Hell, it might be more money than you see in a month. You think I'm a beggar? I think you're a proud woman who wants what's best for her son. Sometimes that means accepting help from those better positioned to provide it." The light changed to green. I pressed the accelerator too hard, the truck lurching forward as my temper finally snapped. "Let me make something crystal clear, young lady. I'm not a charity case, and I don't need your damn money. Now see here." "No, you see here." My voice rose, filling the small cab of the truck. "I've worked hard every single day since I was 16 years old. I raised that boy on my own after his father died. And I did it without anyone's help, especially not from some spoiled rich girl who thinks her money makes her better than everyone else." A stunned silence stretched between us. I could practically hear her shock through the phone. "That boy loves you, for some reason I can't possibly fathom." I continued, my voice steady now, dangerously calm. "So, for his sake, I will play nice at your fancy wedding. But don't you ever mistake my politeness for weakness. You're making a mistake, old woman. You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Neither do you," I said, ending the call and tossing the phone onto the passenger seat. My heart hammered against my ribs as I drove through the familiar neighborhoods of my youth. The grand mansions and manicured lawns of Beacon Hill gave way to smaller homes with chain-link fences and gardens that looked lived in rather than professionally landscaped. The adrenaline coursed through my veins like electricity. For the first time in years, I felt truly, powerfully alive. Chloe had expected me to roll over, to take her money and her insults with grateful submission. The sheer shock in her voice when I'd fought back was worth every moment of Michael's disappointment that might follow. But would it follow? Michael loved Chloe. He saw something in her that I clearly missed. Or maybe he was just blinded by her wealth and status, seduced by a life he'd never imagined was possible. My phone buzzed with a text message. I ignored it, focusing on the road ahead. My suburb was only 10 minutes away now. My neighborhood. My people. My world. A world where a person's worth wasn't measured by their bank account or the thread count of their clothes. The phone buzzed again, then a third time. At the next red light, I glanced at the screen. 3 messages, all from unknown numbers. "This isn't over. You'll regret this. Michael will choose me." I deleted them without a second thought and dropped the phone back onto the seat. Let her send her pathetic little threats. Let her try to intimidate me with her money and her connections. She had just learned something that all her expensive education had failed to teach her. Some women don't stay down when you knock them over. The truck rumbled through the tree-lined streets of my neighborhood, past the modest homes where teachers and mechanics and retirees like me lived quiet, dignified lives. There were no marble floors or crystal chandeliers here, just honest work and honest people who knew the value of both. I pulled into my driveway, the familiar creak of the garage door opening feeling like a warm welcome home. For 37 years, I'd come home to this house first with my husband, then with Michael, and now alone. But it was mine, earned with sweat and sacrifice, not inherited privilege. Chloe Harrington had no idea what she had just awakened. The anger that had felt so good during the phone call started to fade as I pulled into my driveway, leaving a hollow ache in its place. My hands still trembled slightly as I turned off the engine and sat in the familiar, comforting silence of my garage. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by something heavier, lonelier. I walked past the small garden. I tended myself tomatoes and peppers and neat rows of flowers. Nothing fancy, but honest work. The evening air carried the scent of Mrs. Patterson's roses from next door, a simple, beautiful reminder that normal life continued, even while my own world felt like it was tilting sideways. Inside, I hung my good dress carefully in the closet and changed into comfortable jeans and a flannel shirt. The contrast felt like shedding a suit of armor, like returning to my authentic self after hours of pretending to fit into Chloe's world. My front porch had always been my thinking place. The old rocking chair creaked under my weight as I settled down with a cigarette, the ritual as familiar as breathing. Strike the match. Light it carefully. Take the first slow draw. Simple pleasures that no amount of money could ever improve upon. What in the devil did Michael see in such a snob? Chloe thought money solved everything, that $1,000 could buy my dignity like a dress off a rack. But Michael was smart, well-educated, successful in his own right. How could he be so blind to her arrogance? The neighborhood settled into its usual Saturday evening rhythm. Mr. Chen was watering his lawn across the street, while his grandchildren chased fireflies in the twilight. The Johnsons sat on their stoop, sharing a beer and a quiet conversation. These were real people living real lives, not performing for some invisible social register. I thought about my late husband, David, and how he would have handled Chloe's insults. He'd had a way of cutting through pretense with a gentle, disarming humor, making pompous people realize their own foolishness without ever leaving scars. Michael had inherited his father's intelligence, but perhaps not his judgment when it came to character. The photos inside my house told our family's story better than any mansion ever could. There was Michael taking his first wobbly steps in our tiny kitchen, his kindergarten graduation, looking proud in a borrowed suit that David had hemmed 3 times. High school science fair projects spread out across our dining room table. The college acceptance letter that brought tears to my eyes because I knew every sacrifice had been worth it. David died when Michael was just 15. He was old enough to understand the profound loss, but still young enough to need my steady guidance through the grief. Those years had bonded us in a way that wealthy families, with their nannies and boarding schools, might never truly experience. We had been a team, mother and son, against whatever challenges came our way. Until now. Smoke drifted across the porch as the evening deepened into twilight. Chloe's threats echoed in my memory, but underneath her bluster, I'd heard something unexpected. A flicker of uncertainty. She had expected me to fold immediately, to grovel gratefully for her charity. When I had pushed back, she had sounded almost shocked, like a bully who discovers for the first time that their victim has teeth. Michael's happiness mattered more to me than my own pride. But watching him choose Chloe's version of events over mine would be like losing him twice, first to her world of privilege, and then to her lies about who his mother really was. The streetlights flickered on, as the neighborhood settled into its evening quiet. Children's voices faded as families gathered for dinner and television. I'd eaten countless meals alone since David's death, but tonight, the silence felt particularly heavy. I knew that tomorrow, Michael would call or visit, trying to smooth over what he would undoubtedly frame as a simple misunderstanding. Chloe would have already spun her version of events, painting herself as the reasonable one, trying to help a stubborn old woman. And he would believe her, because he wanted to believe her, because his entire future seemed to depend on believing her. My cigarette burned down to ash as I sat there, watching the familiar rhythms of my neighborhood unfold. This was my world, modest but honest, earned through decades of hard work and sacrifice. Chloe could mock it all she wanted, but she would never understand the profound satisfaction of building something real from nothing. The porch light cast long shadows as I finally stubbed out the cigarette and stood up to go inside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests of my resolve. But tonight, in the quiet solitude of my small home, I could still remember who I was and what I had accomplished. Inside, the house felt emptier than usual. Family photos smiled down from every surface, capturing moments of joy that now felt impossibly distant. Michael's childhood bedroom remained exactly as he'd left it for college, a shrine to the dreams I had helped nurture into reality. I knew I would have to tell him what really happened during that phone call. The question was whether he would believe his mother or his fiancé when their stories inevitably collided. Sunday morning arrived gray and restless, perfectly matching my mood after a night of tossing and turning. I'd replayed the phone conversation with Chloe a dozen times in my head, her condescension growing sharper and more venomous with each memory. The coffee tasted bitter in my empty kitchen as I scanned the newspaper without actually reading the words. Michael's car pulled into my driveway at 10:30, earlier than his usual Sunday visits. Through the window, I watched him gather his things and lock the car doors with quick, efficient movements. His face wore the same determined expression I remembered from his teenage years, the one he got when he'd set his mind to solving a problem. "Good morning, Mom." He breezed through my front door with a forced cheerfulness, kissing my cheek before settling onto the couch. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" I poured him a cup of coffee in the mug he'd made for me in his 7th grade pottery class, lopsided but treasured. "Surprised to see you so early, sweetheart. Well, I wanted to stop by and clear up yesterday's confusion." He smoothed the leg of his pants with nervous fingers. "Chloe mentioned there might have been some kind of misunderstanding after dinner." The careful, rehearsed phrasing told me everything. Chloe had already spun her version, probably painting herself as the patient victim of my misplaced, irrational anger. "What kind of misunderstanding did she describe?" Michael's smile wavered slightly. "She said, you seemed upset during your phone conversation. Maybe you took something the wrong way. You know how people can be. All that pride and miscommunication." I set down my coffee cup with deliberate care. "Michael, I need you to listen to me and hear exactly what happened yesterday." For the next 10 minutes, I walked him through Chloe's phone call, word for word. Her condescending tone, the comment about the homeless shelter, the $1,000 bribe disguised as help. I watched his expression shift from confident dismissal to uncomfortable doubt, and finally, to defensive anger. "Mom, that's completely different from what Chloe told me." His voice carried a sharp note of accusation, as if I were the one who was lying. "She said she offered to help with wedding expenses and you just got offended." $1,000 for a dress, Michael? Because I look like I'd wandered in from a soup kitchen. Those were her exact words. He stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked my modest garden. "Chloe would never say something like that. She's not cruel. Then one of us is lying to you." The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. Michael turned back to face me, his eyes bright with the unshed tears of frustration. "Mom, you've barely spent 2 hours with her. I've been with Chloe for 8 months. I know her. She's kind and generous and thoughtful. Maybe you just misunderstood her tone over the phone. There's no misunderstanding a person calling your mother a beggar, sweetheart. She didn't call you a beggar. She was trying to help." His voice rose with each word. "Do you have any idea how much weddings cost these days? Maybe she was just being practical." I leaned back in my recliner, studying my son's face, the defensive flush in his cheeks, the way he avoided making direct eye contact, the slight tremor in his voice. They were all the signs of someone fighting desperately to maintain a belief that was under assault. "Michael, when have I ever lied to you?" "Never, but," he trailed off, wrapping his arms around himself. "This is different. This is about Chloe, about our future together. You don't understand what it's like. Falling in love with someone amazing, building a life together. I was married to your father for 17 years. I understand love. That was different. You and Dad were from the same background, the same world. Chloe and I are bridging different worlds, and that's complicated." The phrase, "different worlds," hit me like an echo of Chloe's own condescension. It was chilling how quickly he had absorbed her vocabulary, her way of categorizing people into hierarchies of worth. And what world am I from exactly? Michael's face crumpled with immediate regret. I didn't mean it like that, Mom. I just meant that Chloe's family has certain expectations, certain standards for formal events. Standards I don't meet. No, that's not what I said, he protested, but his words lacked conviction. Look, maybe Chloe could have phrased things better, but her heart was in the right place. She just wants you to feel comfortable at the wedding. I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 65 years. Comfortable by accepting her charity? It's not charity when it's family helping family. I'm not her family, Michael. You are. And if she can't treat your mother with basic respect, what does that tell you about how she really sees you? His face hardened with the same stubborn expression I'd seen countless times during his adolescence. Chloe loves me. We're building something beautiful together, and I won't let anyone destroy that. Not even you. The words hit me harder than any of Chloe's insults ever could. Coming from Michael, they felt like a profound betrayal, like watching my own son choose a stranger's lies over the lifetime of truth we had built between us. So, you believe her? I believe the woman I'm going to marry. Yes. He gathered his keys with sharp, angry movements. I came here hoping we could work this out, but you're just determined to see the worst in Chloe. And you're determined to see the best, even when she shows you otherwise. Michael paused at the door, his hand on the knob. I love you, Mom, but I love Chloe too. And if you can't accept that, then maybe you shouldn't come to the wedding. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded as final as a gavel. I stood alone in my suddenly silent living room, listening to his car engine start and then fade into the distance. For the first time in my son's 32 years, we had ended a conversation in anger, with words that neither of us could ever take back. The afternoon passed in a blur of mechanical activities. I cleaned an already clean house, trimmed hedges that didn't need trimming, and organized the tools in my garage for the third time this month. Anything to keep my hands busy while my mind wrestled with Michael's devastating words. By 8:00 p.m., exhaustion finally drove me to my bedroom, seeking refuge in the most private corner of my world. The photographs on my dresser seemed to mock me now. Michael at 5, gap-toothed and grinning after losing his first tooth. Michael at 12, looking proud in his middle school graduation suit. Michael at 18, radiant in his high school cap and gown, hugging me tight while tears of joy streamed down both our faces. Each image captured a moment when I was his hero, his protector, his most trusted advisor. When had that all changed? When had Chloe's 8-month courtship managed to erase 32 years of unconditional love and loyalty? I picked up my favorite photo, Michael at 25, receiving his master's degree. He had insisted that I stand right beside him for the family pictures, declaring loudly for everyone to hear that none of his success would have been possible without his mother's unwavering support. The pride in his voice that day had made every single sacrifice worthwhile. I love you, Mom, but I love Chloe too. His words echoed through the quiet room, as if love were some kind of zero-sum game, as if choosing Chloe meant he had to abandon me. My late husband, David, had taught him better than that. Love, he always said, multiplies when it's shared. It doesn't diminish. The weight of betrayal settled in my chest like a physical ache. Not Chloe's betrayal. I had expected nothing better from her. It was Michael's betrayal that cut so deep, because it had been utterly unthinkable. He had chosen her lies over my truth, her version of reality over our entire shared history. I set down the graduation photo and picked up another, Michael at 10, standing proudly beside the vegetable garden we had planted together in the months after David's death. We had needed that project, needed to nurture something living and growing to anchor us during those dark months of grief. He had insisted on planting extra tomatoes to share with the neighbors, even though money was incredibly tight back then. Maybe you misunderstood her tone. His voice in my memory carried such conviction, such certainty that his mother was wrong, and his fiancé was right. When had my judgment become so untrustworthy in his eyes? The bedside lamp cast a warm, soft light across decades of memories. Birthday parties in our small backyard, Christmas mornings gathered around our modest tree, quiet evenings helping him with homework at the kitchen table. These were the simple, priceless moments that had built an unbreakable bond between a mother and her son. Or, so I had thought. David's old watchbox sat on the corner of the dresser, still exactly where he'd left it all those years ago. Inside, wrapped carefully in tissue paper, lay the modest wedding band I had bought him with 3 months of my factory wages. No diamonds, no gold, just a simple silver band that had seemed like the most precious thing in the world to our young eyes. Michael had loved that ring as a child. He had sometimes worn it on his thumb on special occasions. "Someday, I'll find a love like you and Dad had," he'd once declared with 8-year-old certainty. Now, he'd found Chloe instead. The house settled around me with its familiar creaks and groans. Next door, the Andersons' television murmured through the thin walls. Across the street, Mr. Cross Breschen and A.T. Chen's porch light flickered with the electrical problem he'd been meaning to fix for months. Normal life was continuing all around me, while my own world felt like it was collapsing, one painful conversation at a time. I thought about calling Michael, about trying to bridge the vast chasm that had opened between us. But what words could possibly repair his faith in Chloe, or restore his trust in me? He had made his choice with the clarity of absolute certainty. The worst part wasn't losing the argument about Chloe's character. The worst part was the soul-crushing realization that my son, the boy I had raised, loved, and sacrificed everything for, truly believed I was capable of lying about something so important, that my jealousy or stubbornness could drive me to slander his future wife with invented cruelties. Outside my window, the neighborhood settled into its Sunday evening quiet. Children had been called inside for baths and bedtime stories. Parents sat on their front porches, sharing the day's small victories and defeats, their families intact, their bonds unbroken. I placed the photos back on the dresser, all except for one, Michael's graduation picture, the last time I'd felt unquestionably important in his life. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests of whatever relationship we had left. But tonight, holding that single photograph, I made a decision. Michael could choose Chloe's version of events. He could believe her lies about my character and her sanitized version of her own. But I would not disappear quietly into the background of his life. Chloe Harrington had started this war with her arrogance and her $1,000 bribes. She had gravely underestimated a factory worker's pride and a mother's love. Now, she was about to learn that some battles can't be won with money or social connections. I set the graduation photo on my nightstand where I could see it first thing in the morning, a stark reminder of what I was fighting for, and why surrender had never been, and would never be, an option. Monday dragged by with the oppressive weight of unfinished business. I spent the day working in my garden, repairing a loose fence board, anything to keep my hands busy while my mind processed Sunday's devastating confrontation with Michael. By evening, I felt steadier, more like myself than I had in days. The phone rang while I was finishing a simple dinner of leftover pot roast and mashed potatoes. Michael's name appeared on the display, and for a fleeting moment, a flicker of hope ignited in my chest. Maybe he'd had time to think, to reconsider Chloe's version of events. "Mrs. Bradley." Chloe's voice cut through my expectations like a blade. "We need to have another woman-to-woman conversation." The sheer presumption in her tone set my teeth on edge, using Michael's phone like it was her own, calling me in my own home as if she had every right. "What do you want now, Chloe?" "I want to clear up this unfortunate situation before it gets any more out of hand." Her voice carried the smooth, unshakable confidence of someone who had never been truly challenged in her life. "Michael told me about your conversation yesterday. Frankly, I'm disappointed." I set down my fork and straightened in my chair. "Disappointed in what, exactly?" "In your stubborn refusal to accept reality. Michael's happiness means everything to me, and your wild accusations are putting an immense amount of stress on the man I love." "Wild accusations?" I repeated the phrase slowly, tasting the condescension in it. "Is that what you're calling the truth now?" "Mrs. Bradley, let me be crystal clear about something. If you don't stop spreading these lies about me, I will make sure you don't appear at the wedding at all." The threat hung in the air between us like smoke from a gun barrel. For a moment, I was too stunned to respond. Then, something hard and cold settled in my chest, a feeling I hadn't experienced since my days in the army. Are you threatening me, young lady? I'm explaining the consequences of your actions. Michael loves me. He trusts me. And he believes me. If you force him to choose between his mother and his future wife, how do you think that's going to end? My grip tightened on the phone until my knuckles went white. You're out of line. Am I? You're embarrassing Michael with these wild stories about homeless shelters and charity money. He's starting to think his own mother has lost touch with reality. The calculated cruelty in her words was breathtaking. She wasn't just threatening me. She was systematically trying to destroy my relationship with my son, twisting my honesty into evidence of mental instability. Listen carefully, Chloe. My voice dropped to a register I hadn't used in years, a tone that carried the authority of a woman who had faced real threats and survived them. You can play your little games with Michael, because he loves you. But if you hurt him, if you break his spirit with your arrogance and your need for control, you will live to regret it. For the first time since I had met her, Chloe seemed caught off guard. Are you threatening me? I'm explaining the consequences of your actions, I said, throwing her own words back at her with cold precision. Michael is my son. I raised him, I protected him, and I loved him when he had nobody else. That bond doesn't just disappear because some spoiled rich girl thinks she owns him. You're living in the past, old woman. Michael has a new life now, a better life, with people who can actually provide for him. Money isn't everything, dear. Sometimes a person's worth is measured by how they treat people who can't fight back. And sometimes, she retorted, her voice hardening with renewed confidence, a person's worth is measured by what they can actually accomplish in the world. Michael knows which one of us has more to offer. I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of every one of my 65 years, and the strength that came with them. We'll see about that. Yes, we will. And when we do, I think you'll find that Michael makes the smart choice. He always has. The line went dead, leaving me standing in my kitchen with the phone buzzing in my hand like an angry wasp. But instead of the white-hot rage I'd felt after our first confrontation, I felt something different now. Clarity, purpose, the profound calm that comes just before decisive action. Chloe had made two critical mistakes. First, she had assumed that threatening me would make me back down. Second, she had revealed just how utterly confident she was in her control over Michael. That kind of blinding arrogance made people careless. It made them believe their own lies about being untouchable. I set the phone down with steady hands and returned to my dinner. The pot roast tasted better than it had in weeks. For the first time since this whole mess began, I felt like myself again. Not the victim of Chloe's psychological warfare, but the woman who had raised Michael Bradley to be a strong, independent man. Tomorrow, I would start handling this wedding business properly. Chloe wanted to play games about appearances and social standing? Fine. But she had just reminded me that some battles required more than just defensive postures. The graduation photo on the counter caught the light from my kitchen window, Michael's smile as bright as ever. He had chosen Chloe's side for now, but the war was far from over. It was time to show that smug socialite what a real woman looked like. Tuesday afternoon found me standing in the parking lot of a local shopping plaza, staring at the modest storefronts of suburban commerce. I had driven past 3 high-end downtown boutiques on my way here, the kind of places where Chloe probably bought her clothes, where the salespeople would size up my old truck and treat me accordingly. This was different. Murphy's Fashions had been serving the middle-class families of the area for 30 years, according to the faded sign above the door. It was the kind of place where teachers and supervisors bought outfits for their children's weddings without having to take out a loan. A small bell chimed as I entered, drawing the attention of a gray-haired woman who was arranging scarves behind the counter. Her eyes took in my work clothes and weathered hands without a trace of judgment, only a look of professional assessment. Good afternoon. How can I help you? I need a dress, I said, my voice steady and matter-of-fact. For a wedding in June, a formal occasion, something appropriate, but not flashy. She nodded, as if I had just passed some unspoken test. Special occasion dresses are our specialty. Do you have a budget range in mind? The directness of the question surprised me. There was no dancing around the subject, no assumptions about what I could or couldn't afford. $400. Maybe $5, if it's really worth it. We can definitely work with that. Follow me. 20 minutes later, I stood before a three-way mirror, wearing a charcoal gray dress that transformed my reflection into someone I barely recognized. The cut followed the line of my shoulders without pulling, and the fabric draped perfectly. It felt substantial, real, not the synthetic nonsense that filled the racks at discount stores. That's a good choice, the saleswoman whose name tag read Frankie said as she stepped back to assess the fit. It's a classic style. It will never go out of fashion. You'll wear this dress for years. I turned slightly, examining myself from different angles. The woman in the mirror looked dignified, respectable, like someone who belonged at elegant gatherings. Not the factory worker Chloe saw when she looked at me, but not a costume either. It was just me, appropriately dressed for the occasion. How much? $380 for the dress. Another $40 for some basic alterations. When will you need it? The wedding's in June, the first Saturday. Frankie made a few notes on her tablet. Plenty of time. We'll have it ready for you by Friday. That will give you the weekend to make sure everything feels perfect. As she wrote up the order, I found myself thinking about Michael's graduation day. He had been so proud walking across that stage, and I had been so proud to be his mother. The simple dress I'd worn that day had seemed elegant enough then, surrounded by other working-class families who were all there celebrating their children's incredible achievements. But Chloe's world operated by a different set of rules. In her world, appearance mattered not for its own sake, but as a weapon in a constant social war. She had tried to disarm me with her charity offer, to make me dependent on her generosity for my own basic dignity. Instead, I was paying my own way, with money I had earned through honest hard work. The difference might seem subtle to an outside observer, but to me, it meant everything. Would you like the receipt? Frankie asked, holding out the carbon copy. Please. I folded it carefully and tucked it into my wallet, right next to the worn photo of Michael on his graduation day. $420 more than I had spent on clothes in the past 3 years combined, but it was worth every single penny for what it represented. As I walked back to my truck carrying the garment bag, I felt a quiet confidence I hadn't experienced since this whole mess began. Chloe had tried to diminish me by attacking my appearance, my social standing, my worth as Michael's mother. But dignity can't be bought or sold. It comes from within, from knowing who you are and standing firm on your principles. The drive home took me through the familiar neighborhoods of my youth, past houses where honest people lived honest lives. There were no marble floors or crystal chandeliers here, just the quiet satisfaction of work well done and families held together by love rather than by money. I hung the new dress carefully in my bedroom closet, next to my Sunday clothes and the navy blazer I had worn to every important event in Michael's life. Come June, I would walk into that Beacon Hill wedding looking like I belonged there. Not because Chloe had granted me permission, but because Michael was my son, and no amount of money or social status could ever change that. Chloe thought she had won this battle by turning Michael against me, by making him question my honesty and my judgment. But battles aren't wars, and wars aren't won by the side with the most money. They're won by the side with the most determination. June couldn't come fast enough. Chloe wanted to see what I was really made of. She'd get her chance soon enough. Over the following weeks, Chloe's confidence grew like weeds in an untended garden. The pattern emerged clearly during our monthly family dinners, each gathering more uncomfortable than the last, as she relentlessly tested the boundaries of acceptable rudeness. Late April brought our first encounter since I'd bought the dress, held at an upscale steakhouse Chloe had chosen. When I arrived wearing my new charcoal gray dress, her eyebrows rose slightly, a flicker of surprise that was quickly masked by renewed calculation. Michael beamed at my improved appearance, chattering about how handsome I looked, while Chloe studied me like a chess player re-evaluating her opponent's pieces. "You clean up nicely, Mrs. Bradley," she said with a tone of studied casualness. "Michael mentioned you have old-fashioned views about modern celebrations. I hope you'll find our wedding appropriately traditional. The emphasis she placed on traditional carried layers of condescending meaning, but I simply nodded and complimented Michael on his choice of restaurant, refusing to take her bait. Early May brought Mother's Day dinner with Michael's college friends and their families. Chloe performed for the larger audience, casually mentioning her graduate school network and the caliber of people who would be attending the wedding. Each comment was a subtle, carefully placed reminder that I didn't belong in such esteemed company, that my presence was merely being tolerated rather than welcomed. "I trust you understand. We'll have some very prominent guests," she said during coffee, her voice carrying just enough volume for the nearby tables to overhear. "Investment partners, political figures, people who matter in Boston society." Michael laughed nervously. "Chloe, Mom's been to plenty of formal events. Remember my college graduation ceremony?" "Of course," Chloe smiled. A smile with the precision of a razor's edge. "Though I imagine university events have a different atmosphere than private society gatherings." I just sipped my coffee and watched her work, marveling at the calculated nature of each and every insult. She never said anything that Michael could definitively call cruel, but the underlying message was always crystal clear. His mother was out of her league, and everyone knew it. Mid-May brought wedding planning sessions that felt more like military briefings than family gatherings. Chloe had charts and schedules, vendor contracts, and guest list hierarchies, everything organized with a cold corporate efficiency, including my role as mother of the groom, a title she managed to make sound like a ceremonial appointment rather than a biological fact. "I've arranged for you to be seated at table 12, she announced during one particularly detailed session. "It's perfectly positioned. You'll have an excellent view of the ceremony, without being central to the photographs." Michael frowned. "Chloe, shouldn't Mom be in the family photos?" "Of course. The formal portraits. Absolutely." She backtracked smoothly. "I just meant the candid shots during dinner, the ones that might end up in magazines or on society pages. We want to be thoughtful about the presentation." The translation was clear. I was to be hidden from public view, while the wealthy guests enjoyed premium seating and photo opportunities. But I just nodded agreeably, even suggesting that table 12 sounded perfect. My placid reaction seemed to puzzle Chloe, who had clearly been expecting more resistance. By late May, her arrogance had reached breathtaking heights. During our final pre-wedding dinner, she actually pulled out her phone to show Michael photos from previous Beacon Hill weddings, pointing out the elegant guest attire and sophisticated atmosphere. "This is the standard we're aiming for," she explained, swiping through images of men in tuxedos and women in designer gowns. "Everyone who matters in Boston society will be watching how we handle this celebration." Michael studied the photos with growing anxiety. "It all looks very formal." "Formal, but not stuffy," Chloe assured him. "Though I do hope everyone understands the importance of appropriate presentation. We can't have anyone feeling out of place or uncomfortable." She glanced at me pointedly as she said it, and I nodded with apparent understanding. Inside, I marveled at her complete and utter lack of self-awareness. She had become so comfortable with her psychological dominance that she'd stopped being careful, stopped maintaining even the thinnest pretense of basic respect. Perfect. The wedding was only days away now, and Chloe had revealed her true character completely, not just to me, but to anyone who was willing to look past her polished, expensive surface. Michael's stress had grown with each gathering, his attempts at mediation becoming more and more desperate as the tension between his mother and his fiancée became impossible to ignore. But he still believed Chloe's version of events. He still trusted that his mother was the problem, and his future wife was simply trying to maintain appropriate standards. Love had blinded him to the obvious truths, just as Chloe had calculated it would. Soon that would change. Very soon. I was ready for whatever June would bring, ready to show Chloe Harrington and her Beacon Hill friends exactly what kind of woman they had been so carelessly dismissing. The dress hanging in my closet was just the beginning. The real surprise would come when Chloe discovered that some battles couldn't be won through money and social connections. Michael deserved better than a woman who thought love meant control, who measured a person's worth through bank statements rather than by their character. Come Saturday, he would finally see Chloe's true colors displayed for everyone to witness. The countdown had begun. Saturday arrived with perfect June sunshine, the kind of glorious day that made Boston sparkle like a picture postcard. I drove my pickup truck through the Beacon Hill district, past historic mansions that could house entire blocks of my suburban neighborhood, toward the Grand Hotel where Michael's wedding was set to unfold. The hotel's limestone facade rose before me like a fortress of privilege, its brass fixtures gleaming in the bright afternoon light. Luxury cars lined the street, Bentleys, Mercedes, Jaguars, while uniformed valets guided them into position with practiced efficiency. My weathered truck looked like a survivor from another era among such automotive nobility, but I felt different than I had months ago. My new dress transformed the reflection I saw in the pickup's side mirror into someone who belonged anywhere that dignity mattered. The charcoal gray fabric followed the line of my shoulders with a quiet authority, the proper cut lending an unexpected weight to my bearing. I had earned this moment through months of strategic, silent patience. The afternoon ceremony was scheduled for 3:00 p.m., with guests already arriving in elegant clusters of expensive fabric and polished leather. Women in designer dresses that cost more than my monthly pension laughed with a practiced, airy charm, while men in custom-tailored suits discussed market trends and political connections. This was Chloe's world, all surface and performance, where wealth was displayed like military decorations. I walked toward the hotel entrance with a steady, unhurried purpose. The doorman's eyes registered my approach with a quick, professional assessment, noting the quality of my dress, if not its modest price point. For a moment, I thought I might simply blend into the elegant crowd and find my assigned seat without any incident. Then Chloe appeared. She materialized from behind a marble pillar near the entrance, positioned deliberately to intercept my approach. Her wedding attire was flawless, a designer gown, a veil of delicate lace, and jewelry that probably cost more than my entire house. But her expression carried that familiar, ugly mixture of surprise and calculating displeasure I had come to know so well. "Well, well," she said, her voice pitched just loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "Look what the wind blew in." Other wedding attendees slowed their approach, their curiosity piqued, sensing that a drama was about to unfold. Chloe had chosen her moment carefully, public enough to demonstrate her power, yet formal enough to make any response from me seem inappropriate and disruptive. "Good afternoon, Chloe," I replied evenly. "It's a beautiful day for a wedding." "Indeed it island." Her smile carried all the warmth of winter steel. "Though I have to say, despite the obvious effort you've made with your appearance, you still look rather out of place. This celebration is for respectable people." The insult landed with surgical precision, delivered with just enough social polish that casual observers might mistake it for misguided concern. But the message was unmistakable. I didn't belong here. I never would belong here. And everyone present should know it. "I dressed my best," I said quietly. "For my son. Your son will be fine without you. In fact, he'll be better off." Chloe gave a subtle gesture, and two security guards moved closer from their positions near the hotel pillars. "I think it's time for you to leave." The guards approached with professional courtesy but unmistakable intent. They were good men just doing their jobs, following the instructions of their employer's family. One placed a firm but respectful hand on my shoulder. "Ma'am, we'll need to ask you to come with us," the senior guard said, his voice tinged with apology. Chloe stood watching with a look of barely contained satisfaction, her moment of absolute triumph finally at hand. 2 months of psychological warfare had led to this. The public humiliation of Michael's mother on his wedding day, witnessed by Boston's social elite. She had won completely, or so she believed. Then, I heard a familiar voice from behind me. "Wait a minute." The voice carried both authority and confusion in equal measure. "Is that you? The same Margaret Bradley?" I turned slowly, recognizing the voice even before I saw the face. 55 years collapsed in an instant as Victoria Harrington approached through the crowd of wedding guests. Her formal attire was impeccable, but her expression was one of growing, unadulterated amazement. Victoria, I said simply, watching as recognition dawned in her eyes like a sunrise after a long dark night. She stopped 3 feet away, studying my face with the intensity of a woman confirming a miracle. Time had changed us both. Her hair was now silver, and my face was more weathered. But some things transcend the decades. The way a person carries themselves, the set of their shoulders, the look in their eyes. The same Margaret Bradley who saved my life during the rocket attack outside Saigon, she breathed. March 15th, 1970. The security guard's hand fell away from my shoulder. Chloe's confident smile began to waver, then crumble, as she watched her own mother's emotional reaction to the woman she had just ordered to be removed from the premises. That was me, I confirmed, feeling the weight of 55 years of unspoken gratitude, suddenly filling the space between us. Victoria's eyes filled with tears she made no attempt to hide. There, in front of Boston's social elite, this powerful, composed businesswoman broke down like the 23-year-old lieutenant I had pulled from a burning Jeep half a century ago. "I've been looking for you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Then, louder, for everyone to hear, "I've been looking for you for 55 years. The wedding guests formed a respectful, silent circle around us, sensing that something profound and historic was unfolding. Chloe stood frozen at the edge of the group, her face cycling through a kaleidoscope of confusion, disbelief, and a growing, dawning horror as she began to comprehend the sheer magnitude of her error. "Mom, what's happening?" Chloe's voice cracked slightly. "This woman is just a factory worker. Nobody important." Victoria whirled on her daughter with an expression of fury I had seen only once before, when she was a young officer who had just discovered that her sergeant had abandoned wounded soldiers under fire. "Nobody important?" Victoria's voice rang out across the hotel entrance. "This woman crawled through rocket fire to pull me from a burning vehicle. She carried me to safety while explosions tore apart everything around us. She saved my life when she could have just saved herself." The story poured out of her like water bursting through a broken dam. How the Viet Cong had ambushed their convoy. How her Jeep had taken a direct hit and burst into flames. How I, an army nurse at a nearby aid station, had seen her trapped inside and made the split-second decision that had defined both of our lives. "I was unconscious, trapped by twisted metal," Victoria continued, her voice breaking with the memory. "Margaret Bradley risked everything to get me out. The ammunition in that Jeep started cooking off 30 seconds after she pulled me clear. 30 seconds. Chloe's face had gone completely white. The wedding guests stared at her with a mixture of shock and disgust, finally understanding the kind of person who would humiliate a war hero at her own son's wedding. "Ma'am," the security guard said quietly to Victoria. "Stand down," she ordered, never taking her eyes off her daughter. "This woman is my guest. She is my honored guest." Victoria stepped forward and embraced me with the fierce, overwhelming gratitude of a person who had carried a profound debt for more than half her life. Around us, Boston's social elite witnessed something they rarely saw in their carefully managed, superficial world. Authentic emotion, real honor, and genuine heroism. "I tried to find you after the war," Victoria said, still gripping my shoulders as if to make sure I was real. "The army records were incomplete. Soldiers were scattered to the wind. I hired private investigators. I searched veteran organizations. I never stopped looking. I never needed thanks," I replied, and I meant it with all my heart. "We were soldiers. We looked after each other, but I needed to give them," she insisted. Victoria turned back to her daughter, her voice dropping to a register that carried absolute authority. "Chloe, what exactly have you done to this woman?" Chloe stammered something about misunderstandings and different social backgrounds, but her mother's thunderous expression stopped her cold. The wedding guests continued to watch in stunned silence as the truth unfolded before them. "This woman," Victoria announced to the crowd, her voice carrying the practiced authority of a lifetime in business and command, "is the reason I'm alive today. The reason my daughter exists. The reason this wedding is even happening at all." The profound irony wasn't lost on anyone present. Chloe had just tried to humiliate the very woman responsible for her own existence. had called security to remove the hero who had made her entire privileged life possible. Victoria wiped the tears from her eyes and turned back to her daughter with a look of crushing disappointment and growing anger. Chloe, I think you and I need to have a very serious conversation about honor, gratitude, and what it truly means to be a Harrington. Chloe's desperate, frantic apologies began immediately, each word dripping with the raw panic of a person watching their world collapse in real time. Mrs. Bradley, I'm so sorry. Please come inside. You should be at the head table. You should be honored. But I simply held up my hand, stopping her frantic attempts at damage control. The wedding guests watched in fascination as the social order they understood so well was completely inverted before their very eyes. No, thank you, dear, I said with quiet dignity. This is your wedding, your celebration. You handle it however you see fit. Victoria stepped closer, understanding immediately. Margaret, would you join me for a drink somewhere more comfortable? We have 55 years to catch up on. That sounds perfect. I turned to face Chloe one last time, seeing her clearly for what she was, not a powerful woman commanding respect, but a frightened girl who had just learned the critical difference between wealth and worth. Take care of Michael. Make him happy. That's all that matters. The walk to O'Malley's Irish pub took us 3 blocks from the Drake Hotel's world of marble and crystal elegance into a world of weathered wood and authentic conversation. The contrast felt like stepping out of a stuffy museum and into someone's comfortable living room, real instead of performed, genuine instead of calculated. We settled into a quiet corner booth with pints of beer that cost less than one of the appetizers back at the hotel. Victoria had loosened her formal collar, and I had removed my suit jacket. We were 2 old soldiers, finally finding our comfort zone after decades spent on vastly different paths. So, you became a factory worker, Victoria said, with genuine interest in her voice. 37 years, Chloe mentioned. Good, honest work, I said, sipping my beer with a small smile. Raised my son, bought my house, lived my life, no complaints. And I became everything my mother wanted? Victoria said, her expression growing thoughtful. A businesswoman, a social climber, a member of all the right clubs. But I never forgot that day outside Saigon. I never forgot the woman who saved my life while rockets fell around us like rain. We talked for 2 hours, sharing the stories of our lives of marriages and children, successes and losses. Victoria spoke of building her mother's investment firm into something even bigger, of the relentless pressure to maintain social standing and the family legacy. I told her about David's death, about the challenges and joys of raising Michael alone, about the simple, profound satisfactions of honest work and modest achievements. I envied you sometimes, Victoria admitted, as the afternoon light slanted through the pub's dusty windows. Reading about factory workers and their unions, their sense of solidarity. You built something real, a community, genuine relationships. And you built something impressive, I replied. Success, security, incredible opportunities for your family. But at what cost? Victoria's voice carried a heavy note of regret. Look at my daughter. All privilege and no character. She nearly destroyed the wedding of the son of the woman who saved her mother's life. What does that say about how I raised her? Outside, Boston hummed with its usual weekend energy. Inside, 2 women who had shared the absolute worst and best of human nature found themselves grateful for both the unexpected reunion and the perspective it provided. Chloe is young, I said eventually. Young people make mistakes. The question is whether they learn from them. Michael seems like a remarkable young man, strong, intelligent, independent. He must get that from his mother, Victoria said with a warm smile. I thought about Michael, back at the Grand Hotel, probably wondering why his mother and his future mother-in-law had disappeared together. He would learn the truth eventually about Chloe's cruelty and my patient endurance, about the long-buried military connection that had just changed everything. He'll be fine, I said with absolute certainty. Michael is smart enough to figure out who Chloe really island. And now, he'll have you watching out for him too. Victoria raised her glass in a toast to second chances, to old friendships, and to the wisdom that comes from surviving our own mistakes. We drank to that, two veterans who had found each other again after more than 5 decades. The afternoon sun slanted lower through the pub windows, painting everything in a golden light that felt like a benediction. Outside, Chloe's elaborate wedding continued without us. But inside O'Malley's, something far more valuable was happening. A genuine connection between two women who understood the difference between what money could buy and what life actually offered. Some battles were worth fighting. Some victories were worth waiting for. And sometimes, justice arrives exactly when it's supposed to, wearing the familiar face of an old friend who had never, ever forgotten a debt of honor. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.